You are standing beside a frozen river. The water is moving beneath a sheet of ice. The air is below freezing. Your clothes are heavy with layers, but your fingers are still numb. Today, you would look for a bridge, a marked crossing, a vehicle, or at least a weather report telling you whether the ice is safe. Now remove all of that. Imagine standing beside the same river 20,000 years ago. There is no bridge, no warning sign, no rescue team, and no way to know exactly how thick the ice is. Yet prehistoric humans crossed frozen landscapes repeatedly. Some crossings may have been deliberate. Others may have happened because migration, hunting, or seasonal movement left no easier route. The dangerous part was not simply falling into the water. It was knowing where the ice would hold you. During the last ice age, large parts of northern Europe and Asia experienced temperatures far colder than today. Rivers could freeze along their edges while remaining dangerous and partially open in the center. Snow could cover weak ice and make it impossible to judge from the surface. A river could look solid and still kill you. So how did ancient humans deal with it? The first answer was observation. Your ancestors did not have thermometers or ice thickness measurements, but they could read the landscape. They could watch where animals crossed. They could observe whether water was moving quickly. They could identify areas where ice formed first. And they could recognize places where the river was shallow enough to cross without relying entirely on the ice. This kind of environmental knowledge was essential. A frozen river was not one uniform surface. Slow-moving water freezes more easily than fast-moving water. Shallow sections can freeze sooner. Areas near springs or strong currents can remain open. Rocks and vegetation can also change how ice forms. So choosing the crossing point could matter more than choosing the strongest-looking ice. And prehistoric humans had another advantage. They were not traveling through these landscapes randomly. Hunter-gatherer groups often moved through familiar territories. A river crossing could become part of a mental map passed between generations. The location of a safe crossing, the season when it froze, the direction of animal tracks, the nearby shelter, the place where water remained open. This knowledge could turn a dangerous river into a predictable part of the landscape. But there was a problem. Even experienced people could misjudge ice, and falling through was not simply a matter of getting wet. Water temperatures near 0 degrees Celsius can rapidly drain heat from the body. Cold shock can cause involuntary gasping. Muscle control begins to deteriorate. And once your clothing becomes soaked, staying warm becomes much harder. For a prehistoric traveler carrying no modern rescue equipment, falling through could become fatal within minutes or hours depending on conditions. That means ancient humans needed more than courage. They needed methods. One likely method was avoiding the weakest sections entirely. Another was waiting. If a river was not essential to cross immediately, people could wait for colder weather and thicker ice. This may sound inefficient, but for hunter-gatherers, timing was part of survival. Animals migrated according to seasons. Plants became available at particular times. Water levels changed. Snow conditions changed. And rivers changed with them. The safest crossing in December might be dangerous in November. The same river could become a completely different obstacle within weeks. Archaeology gives us clues that prehistoric humans were capable of navigating extremely cold environments. At Yana RHS in Siberia, humans were living above the Arctic Circle around 31,000 years ago. They hunted Arctic animals. They manufactured sophisticated tools. And they survived in an environment where frozen rivers and seasonal ice would have been unavoidable parts of daily life. But surviving in the Arctic does not automatically prove that Yana's inhabitants crossed rivers on foot over ice. That distinction matters. Archaeology rarely preserves the exact moment someone crossed a frozen river. Instead, researchers reconstruct behavior from the environment, technology, animal remains, and movement patterns. And those clues reveal something important. These people understood cold landscapes well enough to live in them for thousands of years. They knew where animals moved. They knew where water could be found. They knew where shelter was possible. And they knew when the landscape changed. But crossing a frozen river required one more thing. Trust. Not trust in the ice. Trust in knowledge. Because when the surface beneath your feet is hiding moving water, There is only one question that matters. How do you know when it is safe to take the next step? One clue comes from the way humans have always interacted with frozen landscapes. You don't need to walk directly across the deepest part of a river. You can look for the narrowest section, a bend, a shallow crossing, an area where rocks slow the current, or a place where the river spreads out and freezes more completely. For prehistoric humans, choosing the route was probably more important than simply testing the ice. And there was another strategy: distribute your weight. Modernized travelers know that standing upright concentrates your weight on a relatively small area. Spreading your body weight reduces pressure on the ice. Ancient humans may not have understood the physics mathematically, but they could learn practical rules through experience. Move slowly. Avoid sudden impacts. Stay away from visible cracks. Listen for changes in the ice. And never assume that thick snow means strong ice. These are not uniquely prehistoric techniques. They are practical responses to the same physical laws humans face today. But prehistoric travelers had something modern people often lack: constant exposure. For thousands of generations, people living in cold environments learned to recognize subtle environmental signals. The sound of ice, the appearance of snow, the direction of wind, the location of open water, the behavior of animals. A hunter following reindeer might notice that the herd consistently avoided one section of a frozen river. That could be information. Animals did not need to understand ice physics either. Their behavior reflected the landscape, and humans were extremely good at reading animal behavior. This was especially important during seasonal migration. At sites across Ice Age Europe, archaeological evidence shows that humans repeatedly followed large herds of reindeer, horses, bison, and other animals. These animals were not simply food. They were also guides through the landscape. Their migration routes connected valleys, plains, water sources, and seasonal camps. A frozen river could therefore become part of a much larger movement system. You crossed it because the animals crossed it. You returned when the season changed. You remembered the route, and you taught it to someone younger. This is where prehistoric navigation becomes more interesting. A modern map gives you a permanent representation of space. Your ancestors had memory. A river was not just a line on a map. It was a collection of places. This bend is safe. That section stays open. This bank is steep. That valley provides shelter. Those tracks lead toward the herd. The landscape itself became the map, and that knowledge could survive even when the physical conditions changed. But sometimes there was no safe ice. Sometimes the river remained partially open throughout winter. Then another option became important: cross around it. This sounds obvious, but it reveals something fundamental about prehistoric movement. Humans did not need to conquer every obstacle directly. They could change the route, follow the riverbank, search for a narrower section, wait for seasonal conditions, or travel farther to reach a safer crossing. The goal was not to prove that you could cross the river. The goal was to reach the other side alive. That same principle appears throughout prehistoric survival. When the environment changed, humans changed their behavior. When food disappeared, they moved. When temperatures dropped, they built better shelters. When predators approached, they changed their hunting strategies. And when rivers froze, they learned where the ice could be trusted. There is something almost invisible about this kind of survival. You don't see it in a spectacular artifact. You don't necessarily find a tool labeled frozen river crossing. You find evidence of people living in environments where such decisions were unavoidable. At Yana RHS, around 31,000 years ago, humans were already thriving in the extreme Siberian Arctic. At Dolny Vestinus, around 30,000 years ago, humans occupied another intensely cold Ice Age environment in Central Europe. Their survival depended on understanding landscapes that could change dramatically from season to season. A frozen river was simply one more problem to solve, and the solution was rarely a single invention. It was accumulated knowledge: where to go, when to go, what to watch, when to wait, and when to turn around. Today, you can cross a frozen river while carrying a phone that can call for help. Your ancestors had no such backup. If the ice broke, the group itself was the rescue system. If someone became injured, others had to respond. If someone disappeared into freezing water, there was no helicopter coming. That made cooperation essential. People traveled together. They watched one another. They shared knowledge. And the most experienced members could determine when a route was too dangerous. The oldest person in the group might remember a crossing that failed years earlier. A hunter might recognize dangerous ice from animal behavior. A younger person might know a new route. Survival depended on combining those observations. So how did ancient humans cross frozen rivers? Probably not by simply walking bravely onto the ice. They watched. They waited. They chose carefully. They used memory. They followed animals. And when the ice could not be trusted, they found another way. The remarkable part is that none of these behaviors required modern technology. They required something humans had been developing for hundreds of thousands of years: the ability to turn experience into knowledge, and knowledge into survival. For you, a frozen river is an obstacle. For your ancestors, it was information. Every crack, every current, every animal track, every season, the landscape was constantly telling them where they could go. They simply had to learn how to read it.